Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BJJ Brick Podcast. This is episode 283. Today we have an interview with Adem Redzovic. My name is Byron Jabara. I'm here with my good buddies Gary Hall and Joe Thomas. We're also known as Snap, Crackle, and Pop when we're exiting the mats. Gentlemen,
I'm definitely the Pop.
Joe, which one are you taking here?
Did you say was nap an option?
Yeah. We are recording this late at night. Nap could have came in handy.
Snap, Crackle, Pop is the kind of the sounds we make as we leave the mat sometimes, though. But Gary's Pop.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, when you crawl off the mats, you don't make those sounds, Gary. When you limp off, you make lots of sounds. Yeah. But got a great interview this week. I'm really happy that I was able to talk with Adem and just our conversation we had. I was pleasantly surprised with how much we're on the same page with training ideas and philosophies and the way he's treating his students. Outstanding guy, and really happy to bring him to you guys, and we could all learn from him. I know I learned a lot, and you guys will enjoy this interview and learn from Adem this week. So really excited to bring him to you guys.
Byron, I am definitely excited to listen to this interview. I mean, you have just spent, before we came on air, just telling Joe and I for a good 10 minutes how great this interview was, and the philosophies, like you said, that he has, and so yeah, I'm really excited for this one also.
Yep,
guys, let me read you something real quick before we get too far into the show. Last week I posted something on our Facebook page, an article that I had found, and the article is 5 reasons your jiu-jitsu is not improving. And I kind of asked our listeners and the guys that interact with us on a Facebook page what they thought about it. And point number 3 was that your instructor sucks. And, I kind of commented that I'm not going to say this instructor, that instructor sucks, but it could be that you're at the wrong school. And one of our listeners, Richard Holt, chimed in, said, I think number 3, that was the point about not being at the right school or having a bad instructor, would be pretty obvious in the first couple of trainings. And then he said, simple mistakes like starting at the wrong school are easily avoided by listening to the audiobook your first year of BJJ, which I thought was pretty awesome. So, I thanked him for giving you a plug there, Byron. And then he said, I am past the book at almost 2 years, but still learned from it. So this guy bought the book after he'd been in jiu-jitsu a year already. He said it was very good and assured me that I was on the right path. So, guys, if you're listening to this, even if you're 7-8 months in, if you've given a thought about buying Byron's audiobook, your first year in BJJ, man, there's a really good testimony there from one of our listeners that has listened to the book and has learned a lot from it.
Yeah, seeing that made me feel good. And I'm glad he's getting so much out of that. And yeah, great job, Joe, on posting that social media, and thank you, Richard, for commenting on that.
And also thank you, Richard, because Byron read that during the week, and he was just so happy. His ego and his head just got so big. And I got to roll with him this morning, so it was easy to grab a hold of that head, the size of that thing. So thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Guys, I want to mention a off-the-mat lesson here that we'll drag on the mats and break down and learn a little jiu-jitsu from it. And I just recently celebrated my 10th year being on the fire department. And I was reflecting,
10 years already?
10
That's
years.
Crazy. I remember when you first got on and how excited you were, and didn't realize it had been 10 years, but congratulations.
Well, thanks, Carrie. Do you remember when I first got on if I knew a whole lot about the fire department?
No, you didn't know anything.
I didn't know anything. And I was definitely behind the curve as far as existing skill and knowledge goes. And if you have the ability to be on front of the curve,
Byron,
that's better. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt, but did you get the audiobook your first year in firefighting?
No.
That would have helped you.
That would have been
outstanding. Let's go back to your first year in BJJ. A lot of people start BJJ, don't really know what they're doing, and this would definitely help them.
Maybe I should make that book happen, Gary.
I think great minds think alike.
But during the academy, it was difficult because it was also new. So a lot of the people that got hired on with me had previous fire experience. They had they went to fire science classes and they passed all those. I was going to take those, but I actually got hired without those beforehand, and that was my plan. Do all the minimum things I needed to get hired, do my interview, and then if that didn't go well, start taking these classes and learning more and interview again. That was the plan. But my first interview went well. I really practiced for it and got hired on the first time I tried, and I was very fortunate that happened. But what happened with that is most people were familiar with the gear, were familiar with the processes of being a firefighter and all the techniques that they have and all these tools that we have as well. All that was new to me. And so I would have to study a lot harder than everybody else. And I remember one day, it probably was the second or third day in the fire academy, where they had us put our gear on as fast as we could. I literally didn't know how to put my gear on. So the element of speed wasn't even a factor. It's like, I don't know how to do this, what order to do things in, and all this was just so new to me. And I was the last person out of these 14 fire recruits that we had to put my gear on. And the instructor walked by, he said, "You're dead," because it was on incorrectly and I would have burned up in a fire. And so that didn't really feel great. But I was starting from zero. And I didn't feel like this was something I couldn't learn. This is just something I hadn't learned yet. Same thing with jiu-jitsu. If you're new, you're starting from zero. And I was in pretty good shape. I would say jiu-jitsu shape. I trained a lot. And so the physical attributes of being a firefighter, I wasn't worried about. I didn't have the knowledge of being a firefighter. And so I had to train hard for that and get to a point where I was competent and then good at it. And then 10 years down the road, it's second nature to me. But initially, if you looked at me in the classroom putting on my gear, that guy sucked. There's no way around it. Same thing if you're in your first class or if you're new to jiu-jitsu or martial arts in general. That's okay to be the worst one in class. You'll get better. You need to have the idea that if you try at something, you'll get better at it. And how do you try? You start training. So my instructors didn't, he walked by, he said, "You're dead. You didn't put your gear on right. The fire would have killed you." Okay, that's trying to stress me a little bit how important this is. But yes, they worked with me and they helped develop my techniques, and they paired me up with other students that had their stuff together better than me, and peers helped me as well. And before you know it, I was doing fine. That's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. There's so many parallels here, but I think having that jiu-jitsu background, I knew I could do it if I trained hard for it, and it was important to me, and it was, and just celebrated 10 years, and I was just reflecting on that a little while ago, and went from one of the worst to I'm not the worst. I think I'm doing pretty good on the fire department. I'm really enjoying it, and I feel like I'm doing good at my job. So I'm having fun.
Well, congrats on 10 years.
Well, thanks, Joe.
One thing I like about that story is that I like that you just got the minimum classes or whatever out of the way and went and applied and didn't have that mindset that you had to know everything first. And that has a real application to jiu-jitsu. It would be great when you came into your first class if you were flexible and you were in shape and you had studied hours of video or whatever. But if you're thinking about starting jiu-jitsu and you're out of shape, don't wait until you get in shape, or don't worry about that. Just come to class and everything will take care of itself. Just like Byron went to join the fire department and they brought him along. They didn't say, "Okay, we're going to hire you, but first you have to go become a good firefighter first." They hired him and then they brought him along. And the jiu-jitsu school will welcome you in and they'll bring you up to speed. You don't have to get good at anything before you start.
Joe, that's a good point. And another point I like that you made, Byron, is you talked about your peers taught you up. Your peers helped you out who had more experience when you first started. And Joe, going back to kind of what you said too, is we may not be in the best shape. We may not know a lot of jiu-jitsu, but I'm telling you, just about every school, well, actually every school I've been into, everybody is so helpful. They are going to help you, get to the next level. They're not going to go in there and, tee off on you unless you have a really bad attitude. And if you go in there with the right attitude, willing to learn, friendly person, everybody is going to pick you up and not pick you up as in to slam you, but pick you up and help you get better, help you learn. And, they're going to be there for you.
That's great, yep. Gary. And yeah, I really felt that helped build the camaraderie between me and my peers there, because I did lean on them quite a bit. My instructors gave them the leadership role to help somebody who was struggling, which was me, out. And it was maybe even easier to learn from them versus learning from an instructor whose job it is sometimes to just yell at you and to try to stress you out. You get your peer, hey, buddy, this is going to be all right. Here's how we're going to do it. And that made learning it easier. So I'm grateful for those guys. I still remember those guys. I mean, obviously I remember all the guys in my class, but I'm grateful that the guys that did help me were there, and I don't forget that.
I'm wondering, or basically I thought of when you were talking about that your instructor came by and said you're dead. You'd never put the gear on before, you didn't know how to, and you were the 14th person to get the gear on. And it reminded me of my first day. I remember I showed up for my first class of jiu-jitsu, and I didn't have a gi. And an instructor told me, you can go down to the local martial arts store, and this was way back in the day where jiu-jitsu gis weren't around. He's like, you can buy a judo gi, or you can go online and buy a jiu-jitsu gi. So I went right down before my second class and bought myself a judo gi and showed up, and I had no clue how to put it on. I had no clue how to tie the belt, and I just remember feeling really awkward and uncomfortable. But just like you said, somebody came over and showed me how to tie the thing.
Yeah, and if occasionally somebody will put jiu-jitsu pants on backwards, pull them aside. Hey, man, it's kind of confusing. I understand your pants are on backwards. Don't make a big deal. Don't poke fun at them. Don't make them embarrassed. And that's kind of what some of the stuff that Adem talks about is you don't want them to feel stupid during training. That's not a very friendly thing. And just let them save face, get them on the right track, and they'll be appreciative of that. We've got a quote this week. What do we have, guys?
We have Mary Pickford, and I guess I'm taking this one because Mary rhymes with Gary. So
that's exactly what we were thinking.
Yeah, so I thought that should go to me. But this quote goes with kind of what we're talking about. We can have a fresh start any moment we choose. For this thing that we call failure, it's not the falling down, but staying down. And, I think this is awesome here because no matter what we do, we're always going to do stuff wrong. And doing stuff wrong, I think, is great because we're going to learn from it. But if I do something wrong and I end up getting tapped out or get my guard passed, I can stay down. I can just quit because I'm so upset over what happened. And you shouldn't be upset over that. I should use that as a learning experience. The great thing about jiu-jitsu, the great thing about firefighting, unless you happen to have a really bad accident in the middle of the firefighting, is we can have a fresh start any moment we choose. Let's just start over. I did that totally wrong. Joe showed me the proper way to do it. I didn't do one thing that Joe showed me, but hey, let's jump right back on that horse and let's try it again. I'll have Joe explain what I need to do, and I will do it. So I like this quote.
Yeah, it kind of encompasses two ideas: the not staying down when you fall down, and I also like the you can have a fresh start anytime you choose. And we touched on a little bit last class or last show because it was the New Year's episode. And people wait until New Year's to make resolutions. And sometimes people, I think, will promise themselves for 6, 8, 10 weeks before New Year's. This is going to be my New Year's resolution. Next year, I'm going to do this. But just like you pointed out, Byron, last show, there's no reason to wait until New Year's. If you've got a goal that you want to achieve, if you got something you want to start chasing, start today. You can have that new start at any time.
I like that, Joe. Let's say you go the whole year, but you started 1 week early. You now have 53 weeks versus somebody has 52 weeks. And I saw another jiu-jitsu school post something about that this last week, saying, hey, I know you got that New Year's resolution. You're going to start jiu-jitsu. You're going to start fitness on January 1st. Let's start today. We're just going to be that much farther ahead. So if you're thinking about it, it's already past the new year. It may be January 3rd, maybe middle of January, but start. Let's, we can have that fresh start. We're going to choose it for this moment.
Yep, good breakdown, guys. I like what you said about the quote and brought it into the new year.
Me and Joe, we like to break it on down.
Well, we'll have Adem break it on down right here. Here we go. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
I tapped out Robin Hood with a bow and arrow choke. The impressive thing is that Robin Hood didn't even have a gi. Just his tights. The Navy has studied my rib cage. They have made many advances to submarine technology, learning how to easily withstand great pressure. According to superstition, stand in front of a mirror and say my name 3 times, you will start coughing, just like after a tight choke.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Adem Redzovic to the BJJ Brick podcast. Adem, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Learned a little bit about you talking with Clark Gracie. He mentioned you and spoke highly of you and reached out to you and was happy to get you on the show and to learn from you. So here we are today.
Great. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And, thanks for Clark for saying some nice words and putting us in contact.
If somebody doesn't know about you and what you're up to and your team there in Chicago and all you've done, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Well, I run a few schools here in the Chicagoland area, along with my brother Eddie, my cousin Idris, and a network of our black belts. We've been teaching jiu-jitsu in Chicago for roughly 18 years. And we have a pretty cool network in the city where our students can cross-train amongst, the different schools in the city and the suburbs. So nowadays I spend a lot of my time just, improving the structure, keeping up with, the latest developments and just running a quality school, as well as, every few times a year I'll go out and teach them seminars, visit the affiliates, and just holding it down here in Chicago.
And so you have a balance between teaching and coaching and competing some and running a business and all that sort of thing.
Yes,
kind of interesting mix.
Yeah, sometimes it's definitely has its challenges. There's a quote that I really like. It says, "Where focus goes, energy flows," and so that's one of the challenges of when you're managing so many different projects. Is sometimes it's hard to just control the focus. So sometimes your focus will be spread out, and therefore everything is just kind of moving slowly. So that's the challenge. I have to make sure that I give as much as I can to each one of those as I possibly can. So if I'm competing, I have to kind of do my best to give full focus to myself and my own training. But when that's done, I try to turn the focus on other things like managing the school, teaching classes. So that's, I would say, is the biggest challenge, is just trying to control the focus because you can easily just be spread thin, and everything, all the quality across the board can suffer from that.
Yeah, I've never heard that where. I'll make sure I'm getting it right. Where focus goes, or where focus goes, energy flows. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I stole that from Tony Robbins. I heard him say that quite a few times, and the more I think about it, I think it's a pretty powerful quote. You'd be surprised what can come from just putting your mind to something. Like ideas start to form. Even things just energy is created from so many different directions you wouldn't expect by just obsessing over something and really focusing on one thing.
That's a great example for jiu-jitsu, running a school. You mentioned competing, like you'll think, a little more about your own game and focus on yourself, and then you'll compete, and then you'll change it and run your team and your schools. Also great off the mat. If you're not focusing on your family, or if you're a student and you're not focusing on that, the energy is not going to be there, and all those things will suffer.
Yeah, and we can even see it, like if we go out, for dinner, me, you, some friends, if we start staring at our phone, the vibe in the dinner is going to change. There's no energy in that meeting, but if we put our phones away, we focus on each other, we really engaged, then, we have, this is a totally different vibe in the restaurant, so it can be for so many different things, something as simple as that as a lunch.
Yeah, it's challenging, and this is it's an interesting topic for me. Eating a dinner with half a dozen or a dozen people, and seeing people kind of check out periodically and look at their phones, and how to get them back into the group that's at the table and is the most important thing at the moment, typically. And it's interesting dynamics, and I try to keep the phone away, or sometimes even just leave it in my car if it's too hard to keep, in my pocket. And and that's where your focus goes, that's where your energy is going to go. And if you keep pulling your phone out while talking to somebody who's important to you, I think that they feel that.
Yeah, but on the other end, like if your focus goes to the phone, maybe energy will flow on that phone. Maybe text messages will be created. Maybe more social media followers. I mean, I think it's just a great example of how powerful the focus is. Where the focus goes, energy is flowing there. Might not be an entertaining dinner, but
yeah. Adam, I mean, that's the same. We're not always at dinner with a bunch of important people. A lot of times we end up, doing things, or you're by yourself, or you have some time to do those things, and that's probably fine to focus on them then. It's like when, if you're at jiu-jitsu and you're more focused on, talking to somebody than the technique, that might not be the wrong thing. Maybe your buddy's going through a tough time at home and he's at jiu-jitsu to kind of get away from some things. And talking to that person is what you should be doing, and having kind of a social time, versus, maybe everything's all good and the technique is really, what you should be focusing on. But it's, I didn't expect you to say like, the phone could be the good thing, but it absolutely can be. And so could being a little distracted sometimes in class, like the people are important there, and to feel like they're being taken care of and looked after. Where's your focus?
Yeah, I definitely think when it comes to that, like, in the school, you do have, in our little community, not everybody is there for the same purpose. So yeah, sometimes, you might have someone whose primary purpose is to just, for social, for, emotional stimulation. They're trying to just, talk to someone, enjoy companionship, friendship. So yeah, for them, maybe focusing on just talking after class instead of sparring, for them, they're accomplishing what they came there for, So it's interesting to just know that also as a teacher, you're dealing with people with so many different goals, and that's okay. The jiu-jitsu can definitely be super powerful for for a variety of different reasons in someone's life.
Yeah. Adem, we kind of brushed over a little bit about your personal jiu-jitsu history. Tell us a little bit about like what got you started and any competitions that you want to mention, or maybe some details about the type of jiu-jitsu game you like to play.
Yeah, the first time I saw jiu-jitsu or heard about jiu-jitsu, I was at my uncle's house. I was a young boy watching the UFCs like a lot of people here in the States. It was like 1993 or something like that. And I remember watching it, and I remember it making an imprint on my memory. I saw what Royce Gracie did, and I was convinced that, this is a very effective, if not the most effective fighting style based off the impression that was made. And then fast forward to my high school years, my older brother, Eddie, he began training jiu-jitsu. He's about 8 years older than me. So I just somehow started getting beat up when I came home. He used to always beat me up, as an older brother, rough me up. But now he started doing it technically. He started putting me in chokeholds and arm locks and stuff like that. So then I guess my training began as just like as a grappling dummy, as a punching bag. And eventually he brought me to class. I think I was about 16, 17 years old. And I started training, but the training wasn't consistent. I was pretty focused on my athletics in high school. I played basketball, and that was kind of my excuse to just stay out of training, because the way they trained in those days was pretty crazy. There wasn't much technical knowledge here. The highest ranking guy was a blue belt. Now people starting their training these days, they kind of almost take it for granted that there's black belts readily available almost everywhere you go in the States now. But back in those days, a blue belt was a pretty big deal. And so the training structure was it was just like the Wild Wild West. So I didn't like it. I was just always looking for excuses not to go, because it's pretty much we just show up and they just beat the crap out of you. I was the youngest guy in the mat, so it wasn't fun. But fast forward maybe another 6 months to a year later, I remember walking in the neighborhood and just poked my head in the window of the school. My brother flagged me in, and he threw a gi on me, told me to spar with someone who was actually my age. Up until then, it was just a bunch of grown men beating me up. And now I sparred with someone actually maybe like a year younger than me. And I remember that was the first time I actually submitted someone, and that changed everything. I think when you finally have the ability to make someone submit, it's very empowering. And I kind of felt like, hey, maybe I should train a little bit more. So basically, after my brother saw me submit this training partner, he basically gave me a job at the school. He didn't pay me, but he made me show up and clean the mats every day and sit at the front desk. So somehow he kind of convinced me that was my routine. I just started showing up, and for years I would be there cleaning the school. I would eventually start filling in for instructors when they were not around. And for I would say probably the first at least 5-6 years, I didn't put $1 in my pocket. And I didn't really need to. I was living at home with my parents at that time, so I didn't really have much expenses. So it just started like that. Eventually, jiu-jitsu started to get a lot more popularity, a lot more attention, more people, showing up at the school interested. So eventually it turned into a livelihood for me, a career. But for the first 5-6 years, it was pretty much just all passion, just showing up because we love it. And now I'm fast forward. I think I'm training for about 18 to 19 years now. 18 years, actually 19 years coming up. And I'm just trying to keep the passion alive. Because sometimes when you start doing administrative work and dealing with people and other issues, sometimes the passion it can dwindle. Something that you love, you can end up not wanting to be a part of it if the ship is not sailing smoothly. So I've been fortunate to have like such a strong team here that, we share responsibilities, and, so I'm pretty much just, trying to balance responsibilities and keep my love for the art alive. It's working out good. Things are going well. School is growing, affiliation is growing, and it's pretty cool to see how something with just some passion can, turn into something pretty special.
Yeah, I want to go way back to the beginning of your journey there when you were starting the training. It was pretty tough. Compare that to a new student, similar age, walking into your school. What's different about that, and how are they? What's their experience like today?
I think as human beings, we're more inclined to be insecure. How can I say this? When you're new at something, sometimes you want to prove yourself. You start going above and beyond in efforts to prove yourself. So, for example, as new, jiu-jitsu, whatever you want to call us back then, instructors or practitioners, we really wanted to, prove ourselves to people. So if you were to come on your first day, it was routine that we would spar with you, or we'd put you to spar with someone else there. And because we wanted to prove that, hey, this stuff works, right? Did you feel it? Did you, you felt what it's like to get stuck in the mount or have to submit? And so back then, you'd be put to spar immediately. Technically, we didn't have much experience or, know-how on how to do things, but that would be the primary difference, I would say, is you would show up and the majority of your training sessions would be sparring. But today, we've taken that out of the training for at least the first couple months. We're basically, when you come to train now, there's a lot more technical explanation. There's a lot more physical drilling, scenario drilling, and then we'll eventually get to positional resistance training or sparring. And then eventually you'll have the opportunity to spar. But before you start sparring, we're going to do our best to equip you with the proper strategy and know-how to get you going in the right direction. Because what we noticed, almost 20 years ago, when we put people to spar, not only did it scare most of the people all away from coming back, but it also, the ones that did stay, we noticed a lot of bad habits forming. People would do things to survive against another beginner, and it would work well for them. But as they progress to like a higher caliber of training partner or competitor, like the things that they're doing that's helping them survive against a white belt is going to get them killed against a blue belt, purple belt, etc. So I would say that's the biggest thing. And then also with that, we have a much more welcoming environment. Now with experience, and we also know how important that is. There's one I don't know if you want to call it a principle or something that I live by, something I teach to my instructors. I tell them that there's two feelings that nobody ever wants to experience in your school, and it's the same two feelings that keep people from ever walking through your doors. And if we always remember this, we're going to have a much more welcoming, safer environment. So basically the two feelings are, number one, no one ever wants to get hurt. You hear that a lot. I don't want to get injured. I can't afford to get injured. So that's something that keeps a lot of people from coming to even start their journey. But also sometimes people will come to the school and they see like, man, this is crazy. There's certain training environments that are much higher risk for injury than others, and students can sense that. You can see that, if you're being put in situations that are, you feel are unsafe, that's something we have to keep an eye on. So the other feeling is people don't ever want to feel stupid. They don't want to feel belittled. And it's another reason why people don't go to any martial arts schools to begin with. They feel that there's going to be some instructor that's on an ego trip, just trying to put people down, because it happens. And people don't have the time for that. They don't want to deal with that. And if we're not careful, that happens. Even though if that's not your intention, the way we carry ourselves in our school, you can have people who have the impression that we think that we're better than them. So keeping that in mind, whenever when we're taking a close look at our environment, we have to make sure that the risk of injury is as low as we can get it. And also, the vibe in the school has got to be as welcoming as we can get it. So something as simple as that can go a really long way in just developing a good team, a good atmosphere, a good vibe, a good school.
So to address the first one, people don't want to feel like they're going to get hurt. On this, I've been training since 2002. Haven't really sustained a major injury, and it's important to me that I don't get hurt for my job.
Yeah.
How do you explain to somebody that you could do this safely? It looks super dangerous to somebody who doesn't know, like, oh, he's trying to break his arm. Oh, that's dangerous, compared to something like, I don't know, basketball, where there are a lot of ankle injuries and things of people jumping and landing funny and things like that. But like, if somebody's asking, is this safe? How do you address that and reassure them that this can be done in a safe manner?
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, I would always just just inexperienced, just tell people, yeah, it's super safe. There's, you can't get injured. And I was just being young and just trying to convince them to give it a shot. But, in reality, and when this conversation comes up with people, I try to remind them that the reality is we can't really fully protect ourselves from injury, in anything we do. I have a buddy of mine who, right when there was a crossroads around high school where I went from basketball to jiu-jitsu, I had another buddy who went to basketball to just nothing. He just stopped playing sports, stopped athletics, and he tore his ACL pretty much just walking. Just walking, he tore his ACL. He wasn't doing anything extra. And for me, that was an example, and there's countless examples of people just getting hurt by doing, random, normal daily activities. So I think that is important to note. Another thing that's important to note is there's something about, an active martial artist or sportsman, something about this journey, it actually provides us with the know-how, the willpower to actually deal with and recover from adversity, from injuries. So I'll give you an example. I've met people who, just normal people who suffered, an injury that someone who's been on the mats for a long time, you probably look at an injury and be like, that's fairly minor. That, I've had that, or I know people who had that and recovered fairly quickly. But there's some people who that injury will plague them for the rest of their life, because they've never learned how to recover or come back or deal with an injury. So they'll walk around their whole life saying, I have a bum shoulder, I have a bum knee, or whatever. It's a mentality. But there's some people I've met that have had major issues, with major injuries, but because of their mentality, they just slightly warm up a little bit differently. They've learned how to deal and recover. I don't want to belittle the injury. Injuries can happen from, like I was saying, you don't know where it can come from. But the one thing I can say from, being on the mats and dealing with my injuries is, I've really developed a deeper appreciation for my body. I've also am a firm believer in the body's ability to heal itself. So sometimes you have to go through some injuries to develop this deep belief for your body to heal and that you can recover. And, but the reality is there's always going to be a risk of injury. We do our best to minimize it. And I think the best way to kind of show them that is by practicing what you preach. If I grab you and put you on the mats with me, I'm very proud of the fact that I can roll with people. And I don't want to sound like a cocky guy, but I can roll with a new person and not really give anywhere near maximum effort and show them that, hey, this is the gentle art. Like, this guy is not really, have to go crazy and buckets of sweat and overexert myself to defeat a beginner. So if they feel that you can be smooth and you can have control, and then they can see the end result. I think there's hope. But if we ourselves have a style where we just have to destroy every person we roll with, that's, I think, the style that has a higher risk of injury, and you're going to have a harder time trying to convince people other than that, you know. So I think it comes down to in the way you play the game, the type of jiu-jitsu you have, you know. And but again, to wrap it up, that point out, like at the end of the day, we don't know what's around the corner, man. We can slip on some ice, break our, you know, some joint in our body, and what are you left with now mentally? Do you believe in the body's ability to heal? Do you have the work ethic to recover from an injury? And so I think it's been unfortunate. I've had my share of injuries, but at this stage in my life, I look at them in the positive light. I think they've been blessings. I kind of feel like I could be a chiropractor or something like that from everything I've seen and had to deal with. So, but yeah. I think any athletic. It's not just jiu-jitsu. I mean, wrestling, judo, boxing, karate, whatever. There's going to be a risk of, you know, and that's life. You know, sometimes you got that. The best feeling is going through doing something, you know, that's not necessarily super safe. You know. Yeah,
it just seems like to me sometimes jiu-jitsu, because the techniques we're doing, they can end in, you know, terrible injuries. But that's we're well aware of that, and these aren't accidental things that are happening. So if you have me in an armbar, and I'm new and I'm not tapping, you're in a good position to like say, hey, you know, you're kind of stuck here. There's really not anywhere for you to go. I'm not going to injure you. Let's talk about this, or let's work this. But versus like an accidental injury, like you just falling or whatever, like in any sport, those are a little hard to prevent. But because you know, people like you are confident in their skills, and you know, you talk about training safely with new people, that's exactly where you want to put them. Is they could feel helpless sometimes because stuff doesn't work, but they should always feel like you're safe. Like you could tell when somebody's doesn't care about your safety when you're rolling with them. It has a different, to me anyway, has a different vibe. I don't particularly like that. It's just, they seem kind of reckless sometimes or whatever. And that, to me, that always gets a conversation. Like, safety is very important to me, and I take that, my own safety and my responsibility, and I don't try to roll people who are reckless towards my own health. And I never really have heard maybe talk about the idea of how to heal, and that your body will do that, but people will get a minor injury and check out for life. Like, oh yeah, I got a bad shoulder now, and that's the thing that they'll be telling somebody when they're 90. I got a bad shoulder from jiu-jitsu. In reality, they probably could have overcome that and continue to do whatever they want to do with their body, and not had a bad shoulder if they were able to work through that injury. Yeah.
I've seen this countless times. You know, I had conversations with people that would bring up, and it's almost like they put that idea in their mind, and it's there. Like, I am damaged goods because I had this, and then when you hear about the injury, it's like, man, that's just a month off the mats. That, you know, that just slightly adjust your warm up a little bit. Yeah. So that is is always a blessing. So that's one of the blessings I see. I mean, it's hard to take away a blessing when you get hurt, you know, and you damage the body. But if you look closely, there is some blessing there, and that's one of them. Is the strong mentality and belief, and the power to heal. You know, the ability to heal, to believe in your body's ability to heal. Yeah. Yeah, and on that note, you know, as far as like keeping the, you know, things safe, and, you know, one thing we try to do here, I know it's, you know, every training environment's a little bit different. You don't know who's showing up to class that day, but if at all possible, always try to keep two white belts away from each other. You know, just for when it comes to sparring, even drilling, it's better to keep, you know, put a higher ranking guy to, you know, help the new guy. But I noticed that, you know, so you got two new people, they don't have experience, because that's the thing, it's experience, it's very important, and they have a competitive nature, competitive spirit, and there's, you know, those white belt years, you want to get a tap, so you get two people who are super intense with no experience. You know, if you look at the stats of, you know, who gets hurt, when they get hurt, it's usually two white belts training, or, you know, or it comes down to the least experienced guys. I think when they're paired up, it's a little bit higher risk. Something to keep an eye on for the school owners and stuff like that, the managers. Yeah.
And sometimes that could be mitigated by personalities. I mean, you could, some white belts are in there to learn and to experience jiu-jitsu, and some are in there to try to prove that they're tough and that that's actually working. And it just, we don't have to look at the individual, but it's easy to say, hey, you guys are fairly new. Let's not pair you guys up together. And I think everybody gets better rolling experiences because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're in the people business. This is the people business. You're dealing with, a new personality walking through the doors all the time, and unfortunately, there's a lot of really strange humans out there that are like sometimes they have bad intentions or they just makes things a little bit weird. So. It is really interesting when you manage a school as a teacher, as a manager. You have to. There's unique challenges that are always around the corner. So I know it's that's one thing that I'm very grateful that I don't have to be in the office dealing with problems every day. I think it's been great that I do have a strong network, like my brother, my cousin, all the different employees and staff here, because I can see if someone is you're the one person running the show, and you have to deal with some of the personalities that walk through that door over 10, 15 years. I mean, it can really drive you crazy. I'm thinking about writing a book about the type of the interesting characters you meet throughout the journey. But yeah.
So you mentioned there's two things that people you want to avoid: feeling like they're going to get hurt or actually getting hurt, and then feeling like they're kind of stupid or it's not working for them. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that your new students, they're not rolling right off the bat, and then they kind of bridge into like positional sparring to where jiu-jitsu is so complicated at some, especially for the new people. There's so many different positions. There's so many good and bad things to do from each one of them. But if you give me two tools, this is to say, 2 ways to escape side control, and you put me in side control and we positional spar from there, I don't feel stupid. Even if it works, or even if it doesn't work, even if I can't escape, I at least know what I'm trying to do. Versus if you show me these two things, how to escape side control, and I'm in mount the whole time, I do feel stupid. I don't know how to get out of the mount. I haven't learned it yet, and I'm just struggling against somebody who's able to hold mount easily.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And also the way we do it here with the positional sparring, once you get someone, they're first getting into it, right? They're starting to get their feet wet. Less is better. I think it's better, maybe this comes down to psychology too. Like, I want the students leaving wanting more instead of hoping that the class would end by now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's something. And even like right now with our beginner classes, we shrunk them to like 45 minutes, 50 minutes, lots of drilling. And I'm at the point now where I actually have the data to really prove that what we're doing is the most effective way. We have 10 years of doing things a certain way, sparring immediately, very intense off the bat and doing things a very particular way. Now I'm not just saying that we're retaining more students. Technically, our students are getting much better, much quicker by doing things this way, by just kind of easing them into it. And imagine if you went to like a boxing gym and now you show up for your first day and the instructor there is like, all right, get in the ring with Johnny over there. And you didn't even learn how to throw a punch. Not a lot of people are going to come back from that experience in the ring of getting beat up. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. I think if we put someone to spar on their first day, their first week, they haven't learned how to do anything. So you're just putting them out there in survival mode. And yeah, it's not surprising that most people don't want to come back from that or don't want to experience that again. And I don't think it's because they're weak or they're, whatever you want to call them. I just don't think that that's the most effective way in, not just in jiu-jitsu, but anything, even in wrestling, you're going to want to show someone what's a double leg or what, how to counter a headlock or whatever before you throw them out there, So just something to keep in mind for the instructors out there if they're thinking about doing things a different way.
Yeah. Adem, we're talking, I really like how you're running your program. It sounds like you have the numbers to back up what it is. And it's not just more students, like you have 10 people come in to the school and now you're getting 7 of them to actually stick around and train longer versus 5 or whatever the ratio is. You're getting more, but it's also better quality. So it's win-win on both. It's not like you're sacrificing the quality of their learning to maintain more students. You're bringing both up. But a lot of listeners aren't training at your school, and a lot of them are thrown into the mix as far as, come and train. If you want to train jiu-jitsu, it's this class at this time. You've got advanced belts and first-day people, and we're going to be learning any variety of rear naked choke all the way to like a berimbolo or something that's a little more complicated to pull off. And it could be their first day or first week, and these techniques are thrown at them, and the sparring is thrown at them. What kind of advice would you have for them to adapt to this type of environment?
That's a good question. It could be, the environment is so important. There's so many great resources or supplements that we have nowadays that we didn't have almost 20 years ago, like all these online instructionals, more research on different training methods and all that. But at the end of the day, I think the environment is probably the most important element of your development. So, and I do think, like, if I'm talking to a school owner or manager, I really think, man, you have to separate the beginners from everyone else. I know that's easier said than done in certain realities, because you have some teams or schools or programs where it's just the reality. Like they have only so many training sessions per week, and they don't have enough students to justify the cost of adding more classes or whatever they're dealing with. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's, I think if you have a program that separates its beginners from its intermediate and its advanced students, I just think everything is going to be much smoother than a program when they're all in there together. Because we went through that. We were that program where we bunched everyone in together. And what I feel that when everyone's in, all levels are in the same class, there's someone is not going to be getting attention. So, for example, if you start focusing on something that works well for the beginners, you're going to have someone who's already tired of, or just done enough of that, what you're showing. They want to learn the berimbolo or whatever. But if you start teaching that, the beginners are lost. So you just can't serve the same, two different experience levels in the same hour. It can be done. It's being done all over the world. But if we're talking about growing from that and making things more efficient, I think that at some point, look, don't get me wrong, there's certain hours of the day, like, for example, 6 a.m. classes, 7 a.m. classes. It's usually almost anywhere you go, it's going to be all levels, just because, that you don't have the same amount of people that are going to show up as you're going to get at a 7 p.m. class. So it's so first and foremost, I think if possible, I think it's always good to kind of give attention to the beginners, even if it's like a cycling, like a 4-week program, just something that they're getting used to coming in, they're getting the bare basics, and then you throw them in, with the rest of the, I think that can be an improvement. But if you find yourself in this situation, you just started training and the information is all over the place. At the end of the day, I think one of the best lessons that jiu-jitsu has given me is you have to play the card that you're dealt. This is what you got. And I noticed, like, human beings sometimes tend to always want to see what the grass looks on the other side, or make excuses for their lack of progression. They try to look outward. If you look inward, you can get it done. Like I'm looking at the people from my generation that started training. There's not a lot of us. That's why I'm saying my generation's training methods weren't the best, because 99% ain't here. They didn't stick around. But the ones that did, the one thing that I notice is that if you have someone who has passion and determination and keeps themselves accountable, you can get through all these challenges. Now you have so many. If you feel that you're not getting, the quality attention from your training environment, you can go and purchase, a beginner course and study that when you're at home. Maybe if you develop some relationships with your training partners, they might meet you before class or stay after, and you can get the job done. I would just say be careful not to be one of those personalities that's always like trying to find a reason why they're not getting better. Like you'll hear like, oh, we don't practice. Some schools might say at their school they don't do takedowns, or they don't do foot locks, or they don't do insert whatever. Like at the end of the day, I think with determination and with the proper focus, the human being here in 2018, you have every resource at your disposal. Especially I think now we have so much innovation in the jiu-jitsu. Not just the techniques, but the teaching methods. We have so much more access to great teachers at our fingertips. I think at the end of the day, to wrap that up, I think it's ideal if you can go to a training environment where everything is structured. It's always better than unstructured. If you have different levels, I think it's great. But even if that's just not your reality, you still have a mat. You still have people who are there for their love of the art. You can figure it out. I know that's might sound like a tough love approach or whatever, but I would just say be careful not to turn into one of those the cup is half empty type of personalities, because they're there and they're you'll see them throughout the journey. I think that's how it is as human beings. Like you have some human beings, they'll see challenges and they'll figure out a way to get around it, but then some people they'll just keep talking about the challenges and be on a negative vibe. It's kind of like when we were in grammar school and people show up to the school dance, and there's some people, they're dancing and they're having a good time, but then there's some people who just sit on the wall talking about how much the music sucks, and then this other guy, oh yeah, I think this sucks too, and then everything is just talking about how things are, and their whole relationship is built on negativity, and that's I've met people like that throughout my life. And I would just say, like, when it comes to the jiu-jitsu, they'll be there too. They'll look for reasons to think excuses of why they're not reaching their potential. At the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is it's up to you as an individual, the listener. You got to get it done. Yeah. All these other things in your life, they're helping you, and they can help, depending where you are, they can help you to a higher degree. If you're at a great training environment, you have a great teacher, definitely is going to be better than having a bad training environment and an inexperienced teacher. Yeah. But I've met people, some of the best in the world have come from inexperienced environments. I had a conversation with Shanji Ribeiro probably 12 years ago or so, 14 years ago roughly. And I remember him mentioning to me, like, at that time, all the great champions at that time, like Jacare, he was saying, man, Jacare's training in the Amazon. He doesn't have the quality of training partners that you would believe he had. I'm sure that's different today, 18 years or 14 years later. But at that time, where he was in the Amazon, the point he was trying to make is it was Jacare's determination that's making him the champion. And he also he was showing that him and his brother Saulo were winning these world titles, but at the same time they were living in Ohio and they didn't have black belts and brown belts to train with. They're training with white belts and blue belts. but they were still able to compete at the highest level and win at the highest level, even though they had no training environment. They were basically training with beginners all the time. Then he also mentioned Roger. Roger was competing and winning. And at that time, he was living in the UK. And again, now the UK is amazing for jiu-jitsu, but at that time it wasn't, But then you'll have some students who are training in those environments at like the best environments, like, Gracie Barra in Brazil in its heyday, or Carlson. Even though you train at the best environment, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the champion. So these things are important, but I think what's ultimately the most important is your mentality and your ability to navigate around challenges and meet challenges. So, but again, going back to the original thing, I think ultimately a structured school's a beautiful thing to experience.
Yeah, you have a lot of great examples there. I like the example of the dance, and you could either be out there dancing with the person that you want to dance with, possibly if they want to dance with you back, or you could be complaining about the song selection. You could either be doing jiu-jitsu with the school that is in your area, or that's available to you, or you could complain about jiu-jitsu in the school that's like around you. Like, it's up to you. But only one of them is going to get you better at jiu-jitsu. Not standing on the wall complaining about it. And I do like it's a tough spot for small schools, 10 students, kind of more of a club environment, to have a beginner class. But kind of find something. Like, okay, on Fridays or the first Friday of the month, I teach a beginner thing. And we're in the middle of the month right now. Come to classes, but I do want you to experience this beginner class with the 3 people that'll be there or whatever, and that way they get some sort of introduction to that. And if that bridges to 2 different classes or 4 classes, or however you can make it to where it's worth everybody's time, and it's definitely worth the students' time. It's just people are busy in a lot of those smaller schools. People have full-time jobs. They come and teach. They go home to family, and it's just like, can I add a class to that? Well, maybe one a month, and it would be a huge difference in what the students can gain from that. But I do like the overall, don't think of it as like, I only have one school I could train at. It doesn't have this. It's too tough of an environment. Still, you can learn jiu-jitsu. You have to get there. And you did mention like online resources are there for you as well. There's beginner things online. I know you have an online program.
Yeah, we're starting to put our focus behind RJJonline.com. For years, we're putting in so much effort in the school. We're trying to, teach the classes to the best of our ability. But now I'm at the stage where I think I see a lot of value in just documenting everything, like having, the stuff that we taught in class available for you to study at home. But also, like when our life work is up, when the time is up on this earth, I think it is cool, especially for someone in my position where I dedicated my life to the art, where my interpretation of the art can live on even after I'm gone. I think that's just something really cool, something you can pass on to your kids too. So maybe your kids can look back and see you teaching an arm lock and be like, man, that's a horrible arm lock. Maybe the art has just refined itself to that point where you can look back and just whatever it is, whether it's the cleanest arm lock or the dirtiest arm lock, I think it's just super cool. I'm really good friends with Clark Gracie, like we were talking about earlier, and now his father is promoting me and my brother, as our teacher. And I remember I had him here at my house, and he brought a DVD of him practicing, of Carle Gracie practicing, or actually just demonstrating techniques in the park, somewhat, I believe in San Francisco, like from the 70s, like early 70s. Doing all the classical self-defense throws and basic attacks, and I just remember thinking, man, how cool is that? Just like it's just to have that footage of you at that age, it's just like a historic, just something beautiful to see. So that's one of the driving forces, but also of the RJJonline.com, but also I think that's just the way the art is trending now, where people are offering their classes online. So we're trying to keep up with, the industry. And so that's where I'm trying, like we talked about earlier, where focus goes, energy flows. I'm really trying to focus on that, but it's a struggle. Sometimes, you'll get a promoter contact me to have a match or something, and then now the focus shifts to training there, So I'm still evolving as a man and trying to see how I can make the most of my time and organize my responsibilities. But at the moment, my highest priority is to focus on RJJ Online, because I think once it's as strong as we hope it will become, it'll also lend more support to our affiliates around the world. So now it's almost like they're training with us from their city.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm happy that the site is online. It's people are registering for it. And at the moment it is a library, and we have like some of the best, athletes and, instructors around, and they come to town, they teach, and we record and we upload. So at the moment we'll have like, Clark is in there. We have Steve Maxwell in there. We have Henner Gracie in there. We have Bill Cooper, Christian Woodmansey, Felipe Pena. I mean, we have like Ben Askren we just uploaded some of his stuff. So at the moment, it's just a library, but our plan is to develop structured programs relatively soon. So you'd have like a beginner level course. You have an intermediate sport course, maybe a no-gi beginner and different levels. So that's the vision is to have multiple styles, levels of courses available. But at the moment, people who are enrolled, they're just going to have access to the library, and they'll navigate and see whatever they're looking for. Hopefully they can find it in there.
Yeah, it's a very good looking site. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And if you're looking for the training, it looks like a great resource. You're also involved with Jiu-Jitsu for Life?
Yeah, Jiu-Jitsu for Life is a project that myself along with two of my close friends, we're creating a platform where, we have all these, just fantastic resources of knowledge, like all those people I just mentioned who are on RJJ Online.
Yeah.
They come to Chicago. We spend a lot of time with some of the the best. So we're thinking, why not, when our guests come, these conversations that we're having off the mats, we have sometimes, I learn so much from, so they have so much value. Let's see if we can record these conversations, through video, sometimes through audio, whatever it is, articles, and let's just have this platform where we can upload all this content to, and see where it goes. So at the moment, we have some activity on our Facebook page, and our website's in the process of being built. But our goal is by 2019 to have roll out our website and be a good source for people who are just looking for quality content on their jiu-jitsu journey. Awesome.
I'll put a link to that as well. Go there and like it, and I just did. It's man, that's I'm looking forward to seeing those pop up in my feed and continuing to learn and grow with that as a resource.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Adam, where can somebody get a hold of you or train with you? Any good social media contacts I could put up?
Yeah, I would say I'm most active on my Instagram, which is my first and last name, Adem Redzovic. Adam is spelled with an E, A-D-E-M, Redzovic. And I'm also active on Facebook. And if you want to train with me, our website here is Chicago Jiu-Jitsu. And on there, you'll see we have the 3 different locations in the city with the schedules on there. And for any of the listeners, if you're planning to come, check out the schedule and then, send me a message. Let me know you're coming, and hopefully things work out, and hopefully, I can see you on the mats. But if not, I'll make sure that the guys at the front desk take good care of you if you let me know you're coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate your outlook on jiu-jitsu.
Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure. It was all mine. I appreciate being on the show.
Man, it was great having Adem Redzovic on the podcast, and that was really my first introduction to him. And man, I was blown out of the water with some of his concepts and how he treats his students and how he runs his school and that sort of thing. Amazing, and I look forward to the time that I'm able to get in there and train with the guy and to see him in action. So outstanding getting to meet you, Adem, and thanks for being on the show. If you have a friend that you think would enjoy the podcast or this episode in particular, share it with them. That's a great way to help us out and probably help your friend out if you think it's a good match for him. So you might tag them in a post or just send them an email with the link to the website or the page that this is on, and that really means a lot to us. And it's helped the show grow quite a bit in the past, just like that word of mouth style of marketing. Hey, buddy, this interview really hit me today. This would be one that I'd be sharing, but people I know, most of them know about this. So, but I probably will tell my coach Jake about this interview and have him listen to that, specifically for some of the things that Adem said. So, if you think this is something that lands with somebody, send it to them and share the podcast. That really means a lot to us.
Yep, and hey, if you're in the Wichita area, you can hit Byron and Gary up, get some training in. If you're in the Houston, Texas area, you can hit me up. I'll do some training with you. And I know both Gary and Byron and myself will train gi, we'll train no gi. So whatever suits your fancy, we'll do either. And speaking of gi and no gi, we've got an interesting article to discuss this week. It's by Byron Jabara, and he got in touch with the folks over there at Maroon, and they've got a great app. We've been using it a little bit to track our training, and they've taken some of the data that they've collected and broke it down as far as people that train in the gi only, people that train no gi only, and people that do both, and how that correlates to rolling time. When you log your training on the Maroon app, you log how long you trained altogether, and then you log how long you spent rolling during that time. Byron, what'd you find out when you looked at this data?
Yeah, when I interviewed Jason a while back about the app and different training ideas and how important it is to log those, I talked to him a little bit afterwards and said, man, you're getting a lot of data about jiu-jitsu. It'd be neat to see that. And he says, yeah, let's do that. Let's take a look at it. And this is one of the things that popped up first as far as this is kind of, I don't know, crazy is the right word, but this is surprising, and it reveals something that's important, because I'm a big advocate of train gi, train no gi, train what you like, but if your school teaches no gi tonight and this is your night off and you prefer gi, you should go train. Like, train when you can. And that's my style of training. If you fit what your schedule with what you want to do, but it's important that you're on the mat regardless of which one it is. And I was a little surprised. So I think that the no gi numbers of it's about 10% of the people on the app train just no gi, as in they've logged, let's say, 20 workouts and none of them are gi. That's a no gi person's only. I thought that's a little low, but yeah, like Gary. Gary would, like, by the time a full year comes around, he'd be probably lumped into the both category. But most people, this is a fairly new app, and it is fair to say if you train only gi for 2 months straight, you're basically a gi person. And if you train, but so it's maybe just the fact that this app hasn't penetrated the no-gi market as well as penetrated the gi market, maybe. I don't know if this is a representation of the entire submission grappling and gi community, but it does have both, and it doesn't matter how deeply it is. We're looking at percents and time training. And you train longer if you train both. That might seem kind of weird, but you show up to a gi class, the average person shows up to a gi class, trains 55 minutes. The average person that shows up to a no-gi class trains 42 minutes. The average person who's willing to do either one is almost 70 minutes. That's a huge difference in just on-the-mat training time. But the big shock is the rolling time. And people that train with just the gi train about 19 minutes of rolling time. And the no-gi crowd's getting about about 13 minutes. So maybe 3 rounds, 2.5 on average. And the people who train both, gi or no gi, are almost at 28 minutes. That's a lot more time that they roll per day that they log training. And I just think that's fascinating numbers to compare. And if you're a coach, you want your students to train both, because for some reason, people that train both train a lot more and they roll a lot more. What did you guys think about this data?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Now, as you pointed out, it's a small sample size. It's still sort of a new program they've got. So we'll see if we look at it again later.
Yeah, it is thousands of people and many, many thousands of workouts logged. But it's all new stuff.
Yeah. See, I don't really think it's going to be a small sample size. I just think that jiu-jitsu, I bet this is typical of the jiu-jitsu community, and I could be wrong too. But like you said, there are thousands of people logging in that information. And I do think there is a lot less gi or no gi people than there are gi or gi people. But yeah, these numbers really surprised me though, especially with the, average rolling time and the average training time. I that just, really kind of shocked me a little bit. But, I think, just looking at these numbers, how can you go wrong with training gi and no gi? You're going to, have a higher average training time, which is going to, lower that learning curve. And then you're going to have more time rolling too, basically over double of just no gi and, 33% more than just gi. So it's going to definitely get you better quicker, I would think.
Gary, out of Byron's 4 guesses, if you will, as to why this would be true, did any of those jump out at you?
I really thought the one that, the times could be affected by students' ability to train. It seems like more classes or more schools that I see have a lot more gi classes and no gi. And, depending on, the days you work, like Byron said, if you're working or you're busy on the no-gi days, you're probably not going to be able to get to that class. I think that's the big one. If you just limit yourself to either gi or no-gi, depending on your schedule, you're going to miss classes if that's all you do. Like Byron said, if you really want to train, buy a gi, buy some no-gi stuff, and go to both of them. You're going to have more opportunities to train, more opportunities to roll, and you are going to see more stuff.
Yeah.
What about you, Joe? What one?
Well, something that's actually not in print here, but I watched the video attached to this. Byron, when you did the video, you talked about those times where, like, if you're a gi-only guy and you go to your gi class, and then somebody comes in after class and they're like, hey guys, sorry I'm late, and I got a no-gi competition coming up. Anybody want to hang out and get a few rolls in? If you're like, oh, I'm gi only, you're not going to get that extra 15 or 20 minutes of rolling in to help that guy train, and vice versa. And so I think guys that are willing and kind of embrace both, you get those little extra times where you get 10, 15 minutes at the end of class. And I wonder how much that has to do with it. And then also I think the open mats might have a lot to do with it, because if you're doing both and you're open to doing both, you might hit more open mats, and that's when you seem to really accumulate the largest amount of rolling time.
Good points, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought a lot about the open mats and how that would affect it, and I just don't know. I mean, I did open mat the day before Christmas, and it was 5-minute rounds for over 2 hours, and I maybe took 1 round off. It was a lot of rolling, but it was all gi. And I usually at long open mats like that, about midway through, I take my gi top off and I roll no gi. And then I don't put it back on because I just can't put a sweaty gi back on. But I don't know how most open mats go. If it's anything goes, and so the people that are training both are switching back and forth a lot, or if most open mats are just one with the other. I don't know what the data on that is.
I would think, kind of like what Joe said, I would kind of think that the people who train both gi and no gi would probably get more rolling at an open mat because, I've seen, people, and here I am a no-gi guy, but, I'll bring my gi along if I need to. But I have heard a lot of people like, hey, is that gi or no gi? And you can all, let's say they're a no-gi guy and you say, yeah, they're predominantly gi. They go no-gi a little bit. And you can just see by the facial expression of that gi guy or the no-gi guy that he's not going to show up, just because he's out of his element, if it seems like most of it's gi. And I think that could stunt, your rolling time and your training time, amount of times you train.
See, Gary, you're a no-gi only, but you sort of defy these numbers because you'll have that open mat at your house one day a week, and you might get more rolling in that one day than a lot of guys do in, 3 or 4 sessions of classes. So, guys, if you're listening and you're no-gi, you can still get the rolling in if you want.
Yeah, it's all what you want. You can still always, make it. But I just think it's cool, though, that Byron talked to the guys from Maroon and asked to share some data, and like you think about it, everybody, every app or, every website you have, and, there's so much data that is untouched, and it's just cool to just, see this data, thank you for Maroon, thank you for Byron for putting this together. And Byron, maybe we ought to do this like once a year or something. And, at the end of the year, this is kind of the, start of the next year, but, we can see the numbers for, see if anything changes, see if there's a revolution or anything crazy going on in the world.
Yeah, that'd be neat. And,
yeah.
Like Gary's a good example. He's a no-gi guy. In the course of a few months, he probably wouldn't log a gi session. He does roll a lot every time he sits on the mats. These numbers don't affect you at all. You could be a gi and no gi person, and every time it's time to go roll, you kind of, it's in a class. Like maybe you're a little banged up, or maybe you're not comfortable rolling with these people, whatever. Like, so you have 0 minutes of rolling time per session. It could be that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But it's like, so you are an individual. We're looking at a group as a whole. People that are willing to train both typically train more and roll more per session. Now, if you just want to train only no-gi, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing that limits you to training 12.8 minutes per session or rolling till that much time. Roll as much as you can or as much as you want. This is just like people who do this roll this much typically, and work with that.
Yeah, I'm glad, when you first sent me this article that you put together, like I saw no-gi 12.8 minutes. So today when I went to open mat, what I did is I just rolled 12. I set my clock for 12.8 minutes, and then I quit because I thought that's what I had to do. So I'm glad you clarified all that. So at least I got a little bit more rolling in.
You got to do what you wanted to do, which was roll for about an hour and 45 minutes.
Which is a little more than 12.8 minutes. So I think I probably skewed the numbers.
But so this app is based on, or this article is based on information from the Maroon app. Joe and I are on there. Find us. If you search for BJJ Brick, we'll both pop right up, and you can add us, and we could see you training. You can see us training, and I found it motivational to log my training. I don't want to have too many days in a row go by without getting to log something. Or, I want to log good numbers. I want to, if I roll, I don't want I roll for 10 minutes. I want to roll 15. I want to roll for 20 or 30 minutes. And so I think I've, over the course of, a week or whatever, I roll a little bit more. Or maybe I got an extra training session in a couple times a month just because I felt like, hey, I got to keep up with this. So it is motivating.
Well, that's what I like about you, Byron, is, you use it for motivation. And, like you're the gi and no-gi guy. And like I know what you told me your New Year's resolution, and that was to beat the average. And your goal for the year is to roll 27.85 minutes. 27.84 minutes, just doesn't cut it for you. You want to you want to be a little above average. So good job.
Well, thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
Give me goals like that.
And me and Joe, we both work for Byron, here at BJJ Brick. And we just got done with our year-end reviews. And
oh, yes.
Like this was kind of like our year-end review. Byron basically told me I need to ramp up my gi training. And, I was a little hurt when he said, I've only got, 2 good moves and the rest of it's pure garbage. That was basically highlighted and bold and italicized. So, I've got some goals if I want to keep my job for another year.
Yep, I got a 2.2 out of 5 rating, so I guess that's 0.2 above the firing level. So
yeah, well, the good thing that
you just got to finish in the top 2, guys.
Yeah. Exactly.
The good thing, though,
I'm the second best employee he has.
The good thing, though, what Byron has told both Joe and I is he's going to change the pay schedule. He told Byron and I that we're going to get paid weekly. And then he looked at us and smiled and he said, very weekly.
Very weekly, yeah.
This show doesn't crank out a ton of money, but we do keep the lights on, and we keep going. And a big part of that is Patreon. Patreon is a website that helps people who produce content, like podcasts. A lot of YouTube channels have Patreon support as well. And if you want to support us on Patreon, most people are donating $1 per episode. We have a couple of people who are donating $3 per episode. That's amazing. And this money goes to help support the show and helps us buy equipment, helps us with our web hosting stuff and all those other things, expenses that we have. And I want to give a special shout out to Dane, Nathan, and Rodney this week. Thank you guys for the support on Patreon, and you've been a supporter for quite a while, and it really means a lot to us that you're sticking with us and showing us that continued support. If you want to support us, we'll send you out a 5-inch BJJ Brick gi patch, a sticker, that's BJJ Brick, and you are welcome to join the private Facebook group. Just send us a message with a link to your Facebook profile, and I'll get you added in there. So thank you guys that have joined, and we look forward to adding you if it's something that you're able to do. And if you're in a financial position where this would be no trouble, we'd like to have you join. Otherwise, continue to listen freely, and it's not a big deal. We like all the listeners, and some people could support us by sharing the episode with somebody, and some are able to support us financially. So we appreciate all that.
Yeah, we'd never be able to keep this show going and do everything we can that we do on the show without our Patreon supporters. And one other thing the Patreon supporters help us with is Byron's fake audio book of the week.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And, me and Joe, we've been talking about what Byron's audio book this week was going to be. But, we were talking about gi and no gi. And Byron's audio book for this week, gi and no gi, is really not that different. Kind of like the small differences between jam and jelly. And Byron, just go on and tell us really about your book. Like, what's the rationale behind this book, and really what do you talk about in this audiobook?
Gary, I have no idea how to handle this topic. Gary was referring to a quite dirty joke.
I have finally stumped.
I can't tell a joke, that's for sure. But,
I was going to see if you were going to run down, if you're going to tell that joke or not, which I figured you wouldn't.
No.
But,
here's the deal. Jam has a lot of preservatives in it, and it's mixed with some fruit. Jelly comes from fruit, and is kind of the form of a fruit juice that's been jellified. If you think they're about the same thing, well, I'd also introduce the idea that gi and no gi are about the same thing. If you want some grape or some grape jam or some grape jelly, put it on your toast, you'll probably enjoy the grape taste on your toast. If you want to do some grappling, whether it's no gi or submission style wrestling or gi jiu-jitsu, you're probably going to enjoy the grappling. Especially when you have a game like me that I don't rely a ton on the gi grips and lapel, guards and these sort of things. I basically grapple 80% the same regardless of if it's gi or no gi. So if I happen to show up, 10 days straight to no gi, I can work the same game as if I would have showed up 10 days straight to gi. You kind of set up a plan with, hey, this week or this month I'm working on sweeps, from the guard like this, or you have some sort of a plan set up, and I want to be able to work those in both ways. Same thing. If you got to have breakfast, you got something on your toast, kind of sweet and fruity, jelly or jam, what's the big deal, guys?
The thing I like best about this book is that there's 12 chapters, And when you buy the book, you don't get them all at once.
I like this.
You get one. You get one every month. Byron will send you a small tastefully wrapped jar of jam or jelly, and a chapter from the book telling you how this jelly, it's sort of like an on the mat, off the mat lesson, you know? So like January is marmalade jam. So Byron, tell us, what does jiu-jitsu and marmalade jam have in common?
Well, Gary likes to use them while he rolls. And that's...
yeah, and that's the one part I liked about your January one, because I've already received it, even though it's not January. You send them out a little bit early.
To you, I do anyway.
Oh, thank you. But that's what I really liked, is how you use both jam and jelly while you're rolling to your advantage. And I like it how you have changed the name of grape jelly to grap jelly, you know, like grappling. I thought that was pretty neat too.
Well, apple jelly.
Explain how you use the jams and jellies to your advantages while you're rolling.
Well, you mix apple jelly and grape jelly, and you get grapple. And then you put that in some jam, and you're jamming with grapple. And it's important to have some music on when you're training, guys. I don't know, Gary, I gotta say this book isn't that good.
No, the book is great, especially the epilogue, where you talk about how you cover your body with both jam and jelly, and it helps you get out of move, or helps you get out of submissions. I really like that trick.
Yeah, I
actually tried it, but some guy just mounted me and started licking me, so it didn't work, you know, the way it works for you. But I'll keep testing it out.
I will say this: if you want the joke, and it's not something that we're going to say on the podcast, you just Google search jelly versus jam joke, and it pops right up. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And this is the audiobook that they're giving me.
You know, this is, like Joe said, this is the audiobook that keeps on giving.
The whole year, yeah. So the program of the monthly mailings.
Yeah. Because I would really like to read one of the reviews that you've got already. And basically that's what I just said. It's let me just read this review. You know, we'll start with some quotes. This is the gift that keeps on giving, by a guy named Clark Griswold from Dodge City, Kansas. So pretty cool that, you know, we have, you know, it just came out and we've already got a 5-star review.
Yeah, I will say, Gary, that Eddie Griswold lives in Dodge City, not Clark.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
cousin
Eddie Griswold.
Man, his last name may not be Griswold.
Oh, I guess I messed that one up. Kind of like a pigeon.
Byron?
Yeah?
Byron, I know it's the kind of end of the year, and
yes,
Gary and I are
it's actually beginning of the year when this is airing.
Well, Gary and I are expecting our annual bonuses. Don't forget what happened to Clark's boss when he tried to cheap out with the Jelly of the Month Club.
Yep. It's
me and Joe.
It's in the mail, boys.
Hey, Joe, let's hold off on contacting the Communication Workers of America and starting the union till we see what we get from Boss Byron.
Yeah, I bet it's going to be twice what we got last year.
So we're going to get nothing again?
Okay, all these jam... Man, we have a lot of jam topics here. A lot of these, if you don't know, are coming from the movie Christmas Vacation. Which is a great movie. A little late in the year or early in the year to be watching Christmas Vacation, but if you haven't seen it, you probably should.
It's definitely a great movie, but that's enough of talking about Christmas Vacation.
Okay.
Just go, everybody just jam on over to the internet. Check us out on Facebook, BJJ Brick.
Nice.
Check us out on YouTube. Byron does a lot on YouTube there. Joe, as I've already said, he's the ninja. He's the master there on Facebook. So those are our two big ones. Check us out there. Any emails you have for us, questions, email us bjjbrick@gmail.com or hit us up on Messenger there in Facebook.
Very good. Guys, had a great time talking with you and a great time having Adem on the podcast. Till next week, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, get better, guys. We'll see you on the mats.
Keep on jamming.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.